This is the worst miscarriage of justice I think I've ever heard of. An innocent man is sitting in jail right now for a crime that police fully railroaded him into taking the fall for. And for all my whiny babies who are going to complain that I talk too slow, remember to tap and hold the right side of the screen to watch it in double time, because this is going to be a long one. It has been 26 years since Ben Smart and Olivia Hope disappeared off the face of the earth, and we are still no closer to finding out the truth of what actually happened that night. Our story takes place at Furneaux Lodge, which is in the Marlborough Sounds of New Zealand, on New Year's Eve 1997. More than 1,500 partygoers would descend on the area that night, and among them included 17-year-old Olivia Hope and 21-year-old Ben Smart. Olivia, along with her sister Amelia and 7 of their friends, had chartered a yacht called the Tamarack, and they sailed into the Endeavour Inlet on the cove next to the Furneaux Lodge that evening. Ben arrived separately with a group of friends, and their plan was to stay at a bach in Punga Cove or find a beach shack that they could crash at. Also among the 1,500 partygoers that evening was 26-year-old Scott Watson. He was a Picton local, and he sailed into the Endeavour Inlet on his own yacht called the Blade that he had made himself. And by the time he arrived, there were more than 150 boats moored in the area, so there was pretty much nowhere for him to anchor. He ended up mooring to 2 other yachts that were sitting there. So he tied himself to the 2 other yachts, which a lot of people did because there was nowhere else for them to moor. Throughout the night, Ben and Olivia ended up bumping into each other. They hadn't come together, but they knew each other from previous times and ended up spending pretty much the whole night together. By the time they were ready to call it a day, they left Furneaux Lodge at around 3 a.m. to 3:30. They caught a little runabout boat, which is a small motorized dinghy, back to the Tamarack. But when they got on board, Olivia was incensed to discover that there was absolutely nowhere for them to sleep. It was completely overrun with freeloaders, and there was not even like a clear space on the floor for them to crash. So they made the fateful decision to catch a water taxi back to land in the hopes of finding some sort of accommodation. Although, given the fact that it was New Year's Eve and 3 a.m, they were probably going to be hard pressed to find anything. But nevertheless, they made the decision to try anyway. Guy Wallace was the barman at Furneaux Lodge that night and also the unofficial water taxi driver. He was one of the only sober people in the area, most likely. And at around 3:30 a.m, 4 a.m, he was ready to kind of call it a night himself, but he loaded up his dinghy with one last boatload of passengers, and there were 5 people on board. These people included Hayden Morrissey, Sarah Dyer, Olivia's sister Amelia, Rick Goddard, and one unidentified mystery man. Guy Wallace decided to stop first at the Tamarack because it was the closest to the shore. This is where Amelia and her friend Rick would be getting off. They were not bothered by the overcrowding and decided to just make it work. However, Olivia and Ben were waiting on the Tamarack to grab a ride on the dinghy in hopes of heading back to shore with Guy Wallace. They did not know the 3 other passengers in the dinghy at the time. Guy Wallace asked Ben and Olivia where they wanted to be dropped off, and when they told him they were hoping to find something on shore, he pretty much told them they'd be shit out of luck given it was New Year's Eve and already like 4 a.m. That's when the mystery man on the dinghy piped up and said that they could crash on his yacht. He had a lot of space. Then he kind of backtracked and said, oh no, only Olivia could come, with there being some clear inappropriate innuendo there. And then he ultimately said, oh no, Ben, you can come too. Guy Wallace said he remembers feeling a little bit perturbed by this. However, Ben and Olivia kind of went along with it anyway because they were that desperate just to find somewhere to sleep. Some speculate that they figured, well, they only needed a couple of hours of sleep anyway, and then they could head back to the Tamarack and everything would be fine. When they pulled up to the man's yacht, Wallace and the other 2 passengers on board the dinghy remembered it being an impressive looking ketch with some intricate rope work and copper portholes and a blue strip along the side of it. It really stood out to them, and Guy Wallace stated he said it was the kind of boat you looked at and dreamed of owning one day if you won the lottery. He also said, and the other passengers testified to support this as well, that because it was so massive, they basically had to help support Ben and Olivia as they got out of the dinghy and onto the ketch because it was such a big step up. Wallace later said he had a bad feeling about leaving them alone on the ketch, but apparently both Ben and Olivia assured him that they would be fine, and he kind of just shrugged it off. And the 3 of them, Guy, Wallace, and the other 2 remaining passengers, that's when they left. The next morning at about 8:30 a.m., everybody was super hungover, but the ketch was gone, and so too were Ben and Olivia. It took a little while because everybody was super hungover for Amelia and their friends to realize that Olivia had not returned. But they knew she was with Ben, so they weren't that worried. They figured she'd probably turn up later on in the day. Scott Watson had spent the night on his boat, the Blade, which you can see pictured here. Obviously looks very different to the ketch that the witnesses described. Before waking up early on New Year's Day, he sailed to a friend's place in Erie Bay and then continued on to go on a sailing trip with his sister. By the 3rd of January, there was still no sighting of Ben and Olivia, and that's when a massive search and investigation began. Police and the Coast Guard searched surrounding bays and waters as well as satellite footage for any indication of this ketch that locals and witnesses had described seeing the pair board, but ultimately their efforts turned up nothing. Composite sketches were taken from witnesses who had seen the mystery man, and all of them showed a similar pattern of scruffy, long hair, frowny looking, I guess. Most people said that they didn't recognize this man, they didn't know him to be a local, but they all said the same thing about his appearance. Guy Wallace would say that the sketch that he worked on with the police didn't really look like the guy that he had seen, but he said he was rushed by the police to sign off on it before he could actually clarify any further details. Straight away, there were some major problems with the investigation. Surprise, surprise. Isn't that always the way? This included, despite the police putting out a call for information about the ketch and the mystery man, they had several people, witnesses, come forward and make statements about sightings of the ketch in the days after New Year's. Some even said that they had seen a woman who they felt sure was Olivia sitting on the back of the boat, and they believe she must have been handcuffed because she didn't look comfortable and her position definitely raised some red flags. However, none of these people were followed up on. The mystery man was not identified. And then police made the bombshell announcement saying that the mystery ketch was not real, it was fake, the unidentified man was not real, he was fake, despite there being dozens of witnesses who claimed to have seen both the ketch as well as the mystery man. I'm going to make this 2 parts, so check out part 2 for the rest of the story.